خليل الله وموسى كليم الله ثم عيسى روح الله محمد حبيب الله.
Now we're going to go into the judgments of proposals. One cannot marry a woman in her post-marital waiting period, as we said. But as for proposing to a woman, that is in her iddah, there are details pertaining to this judgment. So there are explicit and implicit proposals. So an explicit proposal is like, I want to marry you. Or, let me know when your iddah is over so I can propose to you. Straight up. He just shot his shot, so to speak. The implied or the implicit proposal could have the meaning of a proposal or a different meaning. So this would be like saying, when she's a divorcee or her husband died, many people would love to marry you. Some men could say that to give her a boost of confidence and self-esteem, or he's trying to drop some clues. Or if he says, hey, when your iddah is over, let me know. Some guys are just, they're straightforward like that. Some fuqaha of the Shafi'iyy school, they said, even if he says, you are beautiful, man, you're so beautiful, mashallah. Or, how's a girl like you divorced? This is counted as an implicit proposal. He's sending clues. However, this is not something recommended to do, because it is not recommended for a man to talk to a marriageable woman without a need. And it is not recommended for the woman to speak to a man without a need. What would be a need? An emergency, for example. You call the police, 911, what's your emergency? And it's a man, don't hang up because don't do that. Or if it's a religious question, you have a mas'ala to ask about. Or you're going to a counselor, for example. This is different. Or if you're working, for example, you're a tradeswoman or you're in business or what have you. Therefore, some scholars deem this statement, like you are beautiful, an implicit proposal. But nowadays, things are very different. Now you see men telling a woman, you look so nice, you lost weight, mashallah, it's been so long, we gotta catch up, let's go get coffee, and this is not recommended. It's not haram, but for those of you guys who have a little life experience, you will see why this is not necessarily the wisest thing to do. So it is better for the man to not even look at the marriageable woman. So as you know, passing the salam, saying assalamu alaikum, is something religiously recommended. But regarding men and women, it is not recommended for the man to tell the woman assalamu alaikum and vice versa. To the extent if a woman says to a man, or a man says to a woman assalamu alaikum, they are not obligated to reply. MashaAllah. However, we are so far away from remembering and applying these cases. To the extent that if a Muslim wants to apply these cases from other Muslims, forget ignorant Muslims, from learned Muslims, from practicing Muslims, he's viewed as weird or she's viewed as stuck up, or as if she owes you a smile. You should smile more often. They say things like that, subhanAllah. How far does it even go? We go even further. The scholar said for the young marriageable woman, it's only recommended for her mahram, for her relatives who are forever prohibited to marrying her, like her uncles, her grandfather, her brothers, etc., to pay condolences to her if someone passes away. It's not recommended for the marriageable man to come and pay condolences to her. So for the man and woman, they need to be responsible, especially at a young age. And I know we have a myriad of different ethnic groups here. In Ethiopia, for example, people are a lot more naive and childlike and friendly. And so lines can get blurred. Right? Other cultures, they have more strictness and firm lines. I just found out, I think earlier this year, it's offensive to say to some cultures, which I won't mention. I don't want people to feel like they're attacked, because that's not the goal here. But to ask them, how's your wife? I was shocked when I found that out. I was like, oh man, how many people did I offend? Because in our culture they say, how's your house? Like, how's your family? Wildachum, kalachachum, hajiachal, meaning your wife. They literally mention everyone. Awa aichal, they mention everybody in the family. SubhanAllah. So it's normalized in some cultures, but in other cultures it's in line with the religion. So we don't condemn or look down on people for having cultural norms that are in line with the religion. Because some people at these young ages, at 18, 21, they're vulnerable. This is why they find it creepy nowadays when older men in their mid to late 20s, they go after, 18-year-olds or girls in the early years of college, because they're very impressionable. They're very vulnerable, subhanAllah. They can easily be exploited. May Allah protect the ummah from that. And so when they flirt, the woman might grow attached to the man might grow attached to the woman, and then what happens? He hears that she got engaged. And it has an effect, or vice versa, and it spreads like that. That effect spreads. So one should be responsible in dealing with these matters, mashallah. And the explicit proposal to a woman who's in her iddah is permissible. As for the implied proposal, it depends. Is the woman returnable to the marriage or not? Returnable is if she was divorced once or twice and is still in her iddah. Here she is returnable. The man who divorced her, he can reinstate the marriage. So in this case, a potential suitor is not allowed to propose, whether it's explicit or implicit. Now, if she is not returnable, her husband cannot bring her back, whether he divorced her by 3, or this is the 3rd divorce, or her husband died, or her husband did a khula, because as you know, if the man says, I give you khula for $10,000, you got to pay me $10,000, and the wife says, I accept, the khula takes place. Or if she says, give me khula for $10,000, or $10, or 10 cents, and he says, I accept, and then now this debt is owed, she owes the man the money. In this case, he cannot say, I now bring you back to the marriage contract, in the case of the khula. That's what makes it different from the regular or standard divorce. It is considered a breach of contract, according to one saying in the school. So in these cases where she is not returnable, then the implied proposal is permissible, and the explicit proposal is still not permissible. So from this, we know that it is not permissible to insinuate to a married woman. We'll take it to another level, and it's unfortunate we have to even talk about this. It is definitely not permissible to insinuate to a married woman that you would marry her if she got divorced. Saying nasty words like, MashaAllah, I can't believe your man treats you like that. I would treat you better. If it doesn't work out, let me know. And she's still married. SubhanAllah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said what means, the one who corrupts a wife towards her husband is not from us. Meaning he's not following our methodology. I.e. the Prophet ﷺ, he just disowned you. Allah. The Prophet ﷺ disowned you. And mind you, this hadith is not just towards men going after married women. This hadith is towards women who they can't control their mouth, and I'm going to be very crass here, and they encourage the married woman, girl, you should leave him. Or they say it even more implicitly. They're slick about it. Oh, I don't know how you put up with him all these years. SubhanAllah. Yeah, they're planting the seed. May Allah protect us from that. From being amongst those people and being a recipient of such harm and plotting. And also know that a man is not permitted to propose to a woman who has received a proposal. It's been accepted. She accepted it. And it was accepted by the one who has authority to say yes, like her father. So a man says, I'm interested to get married to you. She says, okay, I have no problem with that. Let me go talk to my father, or you talk to my father. And the father accepts for them to start the courting phase. In this case, it is haram to propose to that woman when she is now a fiance, if you will. Once a proposal is accepted, it is not permissible for one to go to the father and say, could you give her to me instead? Save 2 exceptions, except in 2 cases. First, if the original suitor or proposer left and abandoned that proposal. Or if the original suitor gave the permission to this new man to do so. Like saying, hey, I asked, the father said it's cool for me to get to know her for marriage, but if you want to ask too, go for it, no problem. May the best man win, or whatever he may say. I never heard of a case like that actually manifesting, but subhanAllah, these details are important to know. And who is the one that gives a final say in answering a marriage proposal? As for the case where the suitor does not have a similar standing, And similar standing here, put it in air quotes or italicize it. This is connected to that proper noun I mentioned, the qualified groom. So in the case where the suitor is not having a similar standing, or he's not a qualified groom, then both the guardian and woman's answers are regarded, or they're taken by. The consideration is both the woman's answer, yani the daughter, and her guardian, like her father. So once both give approval for the man who's not considered a qualified groom, then this marriage proposal is considered accepted. So the man can't come and say, well, he's not even a qualified groom, so I'm going to propose. If she accepts, the father accepts, then there's nothing you can do about it. Move on to the next one. Now, if the suitor has a similar standing, again, italicize it if you want your notes, he's a qualified groom. Then you look at two cases. Is the woman a virgin? If so, then the guardian is the one whose answer is regarded or taken by. If the woman was not a virgin, then the woman is the one whose answer is regarded or taken by. So, if someone was engaged to another, this does not mean that the man is permitted to enjoy the woman and vice versa. I think I get this question a few times a year. Sheikh, I have a question. I heard that when you're engaged, you can ask her to see her hair in a picture on FaceTime. You can see her body. You can tell her to spin in a camera. You can see it in person even. That's what they're saying. That's what they're asking about. You're engaged, you're not married. By virtue of being engaged, you do not have the rights of a married person. So he's not allowed to look at her aura, like her hair, her in shorts or whatever these guys think they can do. I'm sure you guys may have heard of that here and there. Or to touch her without a barrier, or to look at her with desire or lustfully. They are not allowed to talk in a way that stirs up arousal, sexually illicit speech. They are not allowed to be alone without a third person to prevent the khalwa. What does this mean? What does this mean? You cannot go to his dorm room. You cannot go to her apartment and it's just you two. You cannot be in his souped up Mercedes or BMW with the tint at nighttime in the alleyway. The shisha bar is closed, everyone left, and you're sitting in that dark car where no one can look in. SubhanAllah. You cannot even be in an elevator with this person alone. SubhanAllah. Khalwa is very, very clear cut. And we're going to talk about later on how this manifests. Just to give you a little preview. Sometimes the parents will say, we'll let him save money for 1.5 years. Or we're going to have the nikah now, but then, or they don't say the nikah, we'll have the engagement now, then we'll have the nikah 1 year or 1.5 years later so they can plan this grandiose party. And so that temptation is there. They put up a lot of barricades for the nikah as opposed to breaking down the barriers. You like the man, you like the woman, they're good for each other, they're responsible. They have mutual respect for one another, and you put up all these barriers, subhanAllah, because of your fear of the dunya. You're concerned if he can provide for you or something like that. But there's cases, if the guy's unstable, that's something else. But nonetheless, we're talking about qualified men of good standing. They're qualified grooms. Because they cannot, for example, afford a $60,000 wedding today, plus the $25,000 mahar today. And mind you, the $25,000 mahar, this is if she's easygoing. This is if she's, being easy and relaxed on him. And he can't afford the megeber today, the shanta, the luggage with all the jewelry and miscellaneous gifts. So you put up barriers, subhanAllah. The one who loves you, I'm sorry, sometimes mama and baba, they don't express their love in the right way because they too are jahil. The one who loves you will help you avoid the sins, will be afraid for you. In your early to mid-20s, what do they expect? People like to have this naive idea of their children. The one who loves you will notice that something is happening which is wrong and works to rectify it. And being unable to control the desire, and lust, by the way, is not love. It's a sign that the person cannot control their feelings. They have a lack of impulse control. So what is to stop them in the future from feeling other things. And they can't control that feeling. They can't control the feeling of, pounding on the woman. Just whacking on her like she's a man. Or for example, who's to say that he can't control the impulse of making money, and so he puts her money, his money, their money into stock options and they lose all of it. Habibti, I'm going to invest for you. Subhanallah. And then now he's in a hole and he has to find a way to get out of this hole. So they have the feeling of resentment, for example. So this resentment leads them to sinning because they can't control their resentment. Or they have a feeling of anger. And this anger cannot be controlled, just like the lust could not be controlled. And so it leads them to do abhorrent things. This is dangerous. This type of person cannot be trusted. This is why in Islamic court, in Islamic contracts like nikah, the major sinner is not entrusted. But how many of us we say, I know this person didn't learn. I know, by the religious definition, they're fasiq, but they're so nice. I mean, they never lie to anybody. Again, by show of hands, whether you press the raise button, the react button in the comments, how many people they were nice to today, they flipped on you tomorrow? SubhanAllah. Okay. So, again, the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, our beloved Habibi, he says, do not trust them, and yet you want to trust them in situations that he's saying you are not even allowed to trust them, and you put them there anyway, subhanAllah. Allahu musta'an, mashallah. Are there questions? Yes, I heard some breathing. I don't know if someone unmuted because they need to get my attention. Okay, if there's no questions, no problem. Okay, is that a raised hand? Reaction. Oh, well, there's a raise. MashaAllah. It's okay. They can unmute if they have a question. Now, if the father met someone who was a righteous man, the father's allowed to go and ask this man, would you be interested in my daughter? This is not something dispraised. Some people, they say, no, we're going to wait for him to come to us. Allah, when you don't give gidra, when you don't give a high merit to the honorable words of the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, the bala falls on you, not on the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. Many righteous people did this. And the religion of Islam encouraged men not to look at marriageable women and for the women not to look at marriageable men. It is better not to look except if there was a need. So working in accordance to this would block many doors that may otherwise lead to evil matters. It doesn't matter if it's virtual. Some of you guys think you're fuqaha. It's not a real picture. It's not the real aura. You're scrolling all day looking at, I don't even want to use the word, but you know what you're looking at on Instagram, and I promise you it's not reviews on consumer goods. And then you wonder why you become corrupted when it comes to courting, or you become corrupted in your marriage. MashaAllah. Prophet ﷺ, he explained the danger of this. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كل عين زانية. Literally, if you take it, it means every eye is an adulterous eye, or commits adultery. But of course, kullu here, like kullu bid'atun dalala, it means most of the eyes. So it doesn't mean without exception all eyes commit fornication, because the prophets don't commit such a sin, the awliya don't, the blind people, the children. MashaAllah. There are few cases where it is better for the man to look at the woman, but they are rare cases. Rare in this time, that is. One of those circumstances is if the man wanted to propose to a woman. In this case, it is better for him to look at her. Because in the past, women used to cover the face. So men would not look at the faces. Or even nowadays, even some women, they're single, they have social media, but they don't post their pictures. They post everything but their pictures, so you don't know what they look like. So the Prophet ﷺ told Al-Mughira, who was one of the companions, what means, look at her. It's more likely that warmth and love would last between you. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, warmth and love, it'll be facilitated if you look at her, right now before you marry her. Your heart is attracted to her. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So if you are attracted to her, not what your girlfriends in the group chat say what defines beauty for a man, or not what your homies think is beauty for a woman. Many times nowadays, again, this younger generation, those in their 20s, they want to go after a woman if their homies would approve, as far as looks and everything. So using this hadith, the scholars used to say it is better to look at the woman before you want to marry her, meaning before you propose. Yani the firm proposal, not like, let me look at her, and then if I like what I see, I'm going to propose. No, you have the firm intention to propose, but you just want to make sure if she has what you're attracted to, as far as her face and hands, and we'll speak about that. However, we are so far away from this, some find it strange for a man not to look at a woman in other instances. For example, they would say, what does this hadith mean? Let him look at her before proposing. Of course he looks at her. We all take a look. Come on, be a boy, be a man's man. They'll say things like that. I'm saying this because normally we encourage men not to stare at women. Sometimes we learn this judgment. Men should not be staring at women. We know the judgment. We strongly and we firmly believe in it, and still would find it weird sometimes when it happens or when they see it in our society. And I've heard, and actually I've been witness to it. Muslim women, we are in a gathering. They're muhajjaba, yani they are covered, they're modest as far as their clothing is concerned. And I emphasize as far as their clothing. And there was a man in the gathering, and he was looking down the whole time. And even when he's talking, he's kind of looking to the side while he's answering, or he's looking down, talking like this. And when he left to go home, they said, what is wrong with him? He didn't even look us in the eye. SubhanAllah. And in the same vein, these women say, oh, the men these days are pigs. When the person has hayat, they have the modesty, you brush him off. And then you say, where are the good men? He's too religious for my liking, whatever that means. Yeah. God forbid you have a nice man who fears God. We wouldn't want that, right? So as we mentioned, it is good to take a look at her before proposing. If he looked, and I didn't need a citing statement, by the way, it's a slip of the tongue, subhanAllah. You don't need a citing statement for sarcasm or figures of speech. If he looked and was not attracted to her, then let him stay silent. Don't say, I don't find you pretty. Don't go tell other people. It is better for him to stay silent. Not to say, I'm not interested in her, I don't want her, because this would not be something nice for the woman to hear. This looking, by the way, is before the engagement, before you get engaged. And by the way, I always forget we have people from different ethnic groups. In Ethiopia, they always say they got engaged, and they're referring to the nikah. Engagement does not mean nikah. In other words, engagement does not mean you're married. Engagement is not marriage. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Engagement is not marriage when we talk about it. So when someone says, oh, they got engaged, this is not nikah. If you're referring to the fact that they are now husband and wife, then they are married. If they didn't have the wedding yet, the wedding is next year, they are married. Some people say, no, they're engaged, they're fiancé, because the wedding is next year, they just did the nikah now. And then they get confused with religious judgments because they're not even using the proper verbiage. And when we say looks at her, this means to look towards the face and hands, right? He's not obligated to tell her that he wants to look at her or to tell her guardian. He can just do it. And if he told her he wanted to look at her, then what would happen? For example, he says, hey, I need to get a good look at you before we get married. He's texting her. He will see a new version of her with a contour, which is haram. Shaykhuna rahmatullah alayhi said the contour is haram. You can go look for other judgments. I know these sisters are going to rush. Shaykh Fulan, I have a question. Is there a different saying where I could wear a contour? I'm a single woman, by the way. She wears contour. She wears mascara. Haram. Shaykh Fulan said the mascara, the contour. What was the other one? The foundation. Or the face paint. The foundation. Yeah.
Concealer.
The concealer? What's the difference between foundation and concealer?
Well, people use concealer to hide blemishes.
Are they almost synonymous? Foundation?
Concealer's usually lighter.
Lighter.
Your skin tone.
It's not your skin tone, mashallah. These things are prohibited, subhanallah. Yeah, I need to what's the word I'm looking for? To deceive the suitor. To look a certain way, that's really not how you look. you're deceiving him with a different shade of skin, or a clarity of skin you don't really have, or colored contacts, or contour to give the image that your nose is shaped like this and not like that. Subhanallah. Or for the hijabis to put that, what do they call it, the sock bun? Is that what they call it? The scrunchie. To give the impression that your hair is longer than it really is. Subhanallah. Or for example, to do your eyebrows every, 2 weeks, once a month, to give the impression that it's thinner and more shaped than it really is. This is haram. So if you let her know ahead of time, you might see this new version, the transformer version, but maybe not the real her. MashaAllah. And if a woman knew he wanted to look, she would definitely doll herself up with these things, and he would not be seeing her naturally. And then they say very nasty comments when they're married. That's not what I expected when I woke up. Or she wears, what's that thing, the corset? She's always wearing that corset in public. Or things that accentuate her breastises and things like that. Speaking about the makeup, is it haram if you're married to apply the mascara, foundation, or contour? Certain makeups, in regards to these, I have to double check. But in general, wearing makeup, if your husband says, or let me put it this way, if your husband does not verbally permit you to wear it, you're committing haram, according to the Shafi'iyy school. When I say according to the Shafi'iyy school, I'm not hiding a judgment from you in the Hanafi school or the Maliki school. I'm saying because sometimes we want to remind people we're taking the Shafi'iyy school here. To what extent, when you leave the house, it is not permissible for you to make, I need to say, I'm gonna go, let me not say it's not permissible. The implication of saying, I'm gonna make the intention when I go to the musalla or the masjid to have a good intention, etc., you either lose all of the reward or you lose a significant portion of your reward. Because you're committing a haram in the process. If you're wearing makeup. A judgment a lot of women don't know about, wearing these Lululemon leggings. It's like paint on your legs. Haram to wear in public. Some people say, well, I thought wearing tight clothes is makruh. Yes, but in the bigger books of fiqh, they describe what is tight clothes. They weren't talking about these clothings that the women nowadays where it accentuates every single curve. You could even see one little bump. If she has a mole on her arm, you could see it through it. Subhanallah. It's like paint. It's not permissible to wear those kind of things. So even if the husband says you can wear the leggings, you can't wear that in public. As for the makeup, if he says you can wear makeup, then it won't be sinful for you. The reason for the prohibition of these makeups is because it deceives the suitor. So if you're married and your husband accepts, you get reward for wearing it in the house. As for outside of the house, I have to double check. So if you could shoot me or my wife a message about that so I don't forget, I'll double check for you, inshallah. Or anyone else who has a similar question in regards to the makeup. So when we say to look at her, this is when he has the firm intention to propose. So a man wanted to propose, firm intention, and he's not on the fence about it, then he would look at her beforehand. This does not mean that if a man was thinking of getting married, he would sit all day and scroll on Instagram or Minder, or I think it's called Inshallah now, one after the other and say, do I want to propose? Do I not want to propose? Let me keep scrolling. Here we mean he had not seen her. He doesn't know what he looks like. What she looks like, yes. But he wanted to propose to her, so he would look at her before proposing. And the Shafi'iyya say, to the extent, even if she says, why are you looking at me? Stop looking at me, you're allowed to look. Even if the father says, stop looking at my daughter, you're allowed to look. And you get one look, at the face, at the hands. Why the hands? Get off TikTok and you'll learn these things sometimes. You can tell a lot about a person's health based on their fingernails. So, or the veins through a woman's hand usually means there's a lot of issues with certain organs. If one has, for example, a heart condition or a condition with their endocrine system, there's discoloration like yellowing in the fingernails, or the fingernails are brittle, for example. And of course the face, because the beauty is in the face, mashallah. Some people now, they want their wife to look like, I don't even know how to describe it, like an Instagram model. They want their wife to look like a filter. There you go. I try to find ways that are explicit. You laugh a little bit so you can remember it, but it's not exaggerated. They want their wife to look like a filter. Why do I say like a filter? Because even the woman does not look like what she looks like in the picture. In other words, you want to marry someone who does not exist. It's not realistic. Her waist doesn't look like that. She used the Facetune app or Photoshop or what's it called? Golden Hour. Because of all these new ways. Turning the knee up and bending it one way so it looks like she has larger thighs or larger buttocks. No one looks like that. MashaAllah. I don't even have a filter. I don't even look like this, subhanAllah. The other day someone said the first video I look Indian. I don't even look like that in person, subhanAllah. So this is something to take very seriously, subhanAllah. Make sure you have a realistic taste in women. A realistic taste in men. Not something that's from Hollywood. It's not real. It's make believe. We're going to go into the invalidity of the marriage expiration date, inshallah ta'ala, or the invalidity of the mut'ah. So it cannot have a time limit verbalized in the contract. Emphasis on verbalized in the contract, which means if the guardian tells the groom, I now give you my daughter Zainab in marriage for 1 year. All right? Because as you guys know, I don't know if we mentioned before, if a father has multiple daughters, he doesn't say, I now give you my daughter in marriage. He has to specify which daughter. I now give you my daughter Zainab, or I now give you my daughter Fatima in marriage for 1 year. This is invalid because he verbally mentioned an expiration date for 1 day, for 1 month. It's invalid. Now, pay attention here. If the groom has the intention to divorce her after 1 month, 1 year, but this was not verbally stipulated in the contract, yet he has it in his heart, or they both have it in their heart, yani they agreed to it beforehand, before the nikah. It was not mentioned in the actual nikah contract. And of course, the contract here is verbal. We don't mean what's written, because what's considered, the consideration is for the verbal contract in nikah, not what's written. Then this contract is valid. So in other words, even if he verbally mentions the night before the contract, so we agreed, right? After a year, so 12 months, today's October 1st, 2023, October 1st, 2024, we're going to end this marriage. As long as he says it outside of the contract, then this marriage is valid. So the night before, the week before, a month before, in the months before, he says, I will marry you and I'm going to divorce you after 3 months. But when the nikah day comes place, he did not verbally mention it. The groom did not verbally mention, and this is a valid contract. Why? Again, I'm not trying to be mean, but yani, love is to say what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, even if it's bittersweet. For those of you women who like to go, as we say, up and down, traveling here, traveling there, with no mahram, subhanAllah, getting desensitized to the fact that it is haram. And for those of you guys who say, well, it's just a minor sin, isn't it? Every step you take, those minor sins accumulate. Being completely desensitized to the fact that human trafficking usually is in regard to the woman, not the man. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, take care of 2 exploited, vulnerable groups, the orphan and the woman. And so when people scam people, they look for the woman who is what? Not with men. And if they recognize she's with men, but they're not her brothers or her family, these men, they go out, they do their own thing. I'll see you at the hotel later. They don't have that ghira, they don't have that protectiveness like a family member would. Whether you're doing something haram on the trip like clubbing or whether or not you don't, we forget that this is a very repugnant thing to just travel up and down, but it's become normalized nowadays. But the women of the past, they used to fear Allah. And so they would have a nikah because, for example, their father was unavailable, or their brother was unavailable, or they had no brother, or they had no father, they had no uncle, they had no mahram, they want to travel for whatever reason. So they would do the nikah, and they would travel, so it's not a sinful travel, and then they would plan a divorce. And they wouldn't have intercourse. It's documented. These men would not have intercourse. They were helping the woman. They didn't take advantage of her need. Would it be sinful for him? No. That's his wife now. But he understands the situation she's in. Had she had a brother or a father or somebody, she would have not done this. But as a result, many times what happened, they ended up liking each other's adab, their akhlaq. They were in tune. And so they ended up mutually agreeing, right? Not forcing the other. Some may call it entrapment, but I don't want to use that kind of verbiage when it's referring to a marriage contract. They would usually actually really have a liking to each other, and they would stay married. MashaAllah. This happens. Or they would come back, they would go their separate ways. She paid him a salary, she didn't pay him a salary, who knows? And they went on their merry way, so to speak. Likewise for the woman, if she marries someone having the intention that after a period of time she does not want to remain married to that person, this does not affect the validity of the contract, as long as we said the stipulation was not mentioned in the contract. That is, if someone marries a woman and divorces her after a little while, then he marries another one, divorces her, and then after a while he marries and divorces. If each marriage was conducted properly, right, yani they followed the tartib of the marriage contract, what makes a marriage contract valid, then each of these marriages that he's getting in and out of are valid. Even if he had this intention from the beginning without mentioning it in the contract. However, and again, some of you guys have no reverence for the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. Here I'm going to now point towards the men. Well, it's not haram, is it? It's like that. It reminds me of that SpongeBob meme when people say, well, it's not haram, right? Is it? Am I obligated to do so? As if like the obligation is the only thing you have concern about in the religion. So if a man marries a woman with the intention after a while to divorce, then to marry another, then to divorce, with this intention, yani in his heart, his plan is to go from one woman to another like that, yani like those of you who love these Hanafi contracts, so to speak, this is ugly. The Shafi'iyya said it's ugly. Shaykhuna rahmatullah alayh, he said this is ugly. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he dispraised that in the hadith. And even when Shaykh Samira, he translated it, he just said it means it's not a commendable thing to do. But the hadith starts off with Inna Allah yakrahu, yani inna for tawqeed, for emphasis. Surely, without a shadow of a doubt, this thing is repulsive in the judgment of Allah. This has a very low, degraded status in the court of God. Yani, to get in and out of marriage contract is to taste. Yani, this figurative meaning to taste the sweetness, the sugar, so to speak. It's repulsive. It is ugly. It is significantly and excessively dispraised in the judgment of God. Yani, there's no goodness in this. MashaAllah. I was going to start with the ages of the bride and the groom. What are the appropriate ages of the bride and the groom? What's too young? What's too old? There's no such thing, by the way, of being too old to get married. Unfortunately, people to speak like that. We'll save that for next week, inshallah ta'ala. We are at the hour mark.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I had a question about the attire of the groom on the wedding night. Is a tuxedo okay or what?
The tuxedo is not haram. What is haram in regards to his attire is the bow tie. As you know, what is haram and halal in regards to imitating the kuffar or the fasiqun is by research. So per research, the bow tie is a customary article of clothing that originated from the kuffar. As for the necktie, it is makruh because its origins is not clear. And of course, the clothing made out of silk. A lot of these ties also are made of silk as well.
Barakallahu feek.
Ameen wa feekum. And also real silk. A lot of times they're using imitation silk. So if you bought a silk tie but it costs $10, that's not real silk. Real silk is expensive, mashallah. But if it's if the majority of the content of the tie or the makeup of the tie is not silk, yani if it's 35% silk or even 50% silk, then you're able to wear it. As soon as it's 51 or more percent, then it is haram to wear. And some, they overlook this because they're trying to look for a particular tie, or their wife or fiance finds them a tie. But you want the most barakah you can get to start off your marriage. Again, it's no wonder why 55% of Muslim marriages end in divorce. We want to facilitate that day with goodness.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, Ustaz.
Wa alaikum salam.
I have a question regarding intention to when you get married. So, maybe there's bad intention on the man and the groom side or the bride side. But, for the sake of an example, I'll just use bride, for example. Let's say a woman is interested in having kids. Maybe age is a factor. And then she gets married to a man, knowing full well that her intention is just have kids. They have the kids, but eventually, whether pushing him out or whatever, she demands a divorce and they get divorced. So in this scenario, is the nikah valid? And if not, will the kids be affected? Like, for example, would they be considered bastard children?
Yeah, excellent question. So, although there are things that are sinful as far as the intentions, for example, you plan to take all her money or take all his money and leave, for example, or a myriad of sins. What makes a worship, whether it be salah or nikah or siyam or umrah, invalid is either one, leaving out any of the arkan or shurut, the integrals or conditions, which in any book of fiqh, it'll label it. These are the prerequisites. Like, for example, before you go into the prayer, the prerequisite is the wudu. The prerequisite is covering your awrah, etc. And also avoiding the invalidators. So in this case, although she has a bad intention, she wants to clean him dry. When she gets his guards down, she wants to take the kids, take the money, the passports, and run. That is not an invalidator of the marriage contract. The conditions for the The conditions for the nikah is what we're mentioning. For example, the qualifications of the guardian, for the witnesses, the verbal statement that has to be said, who's allowed to get married, for example, is she within her iddah or not? This person that's a hermaphrodite, are they a clear hermaphrodite or an unclear hermaphrodite? When these conditions and integrals are addressed, then even if someone has a very repugnant intention, this does not affect the legitimacy of the marriage contract. Therefore, it does not affect the legitimacy of the children's lineage. Those would not be bastard children, if that's clear. Similarly, if one has some people, they do this during Hajj and Umrah. They go to Al-Haramain and they're praying, but they're trying to blend in and see who they can take their, cut open someone's bag. There's a lot of criminals during Hajj and Umrah. Although they have a bad intention where they're here doing Hajj and Umrah, their Hajj and Umrah is valid. As for the rewardability, that is another question. So that's clear.
So I had a question regarding the marriage contract. Because it is verbal, would that mean that any other stipulations that either the bride and groom were to make has to also be verbal when it's currently being done?
Could you give me an example of a stipulation?
It's hard to think of one on top of my mind right now.
Okay.
But
could I give you one?
Yes.
One common one I hear women ask about, and they swear a mufti somewhere said that it's okay, is that she could stipulate in the marriage contract that he's not allowed to have a second wife. We'll talk about polygyny later. This is not to be a facetious or contentious topic, but we're not going to skip religious chapters. That has no weight. A condition in the contract can never wipe out what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained as sacred law. So if a woman says in the nikah contract that this marriage contract is intact so long as he doesn't marry a second wife, whether in secret, whether in open, although I do not advise brothers to have secret marriages, that stipulation, that addendum has no weight. Just like if the man put in the contract, because she's well off, she pays the mortgage. I know she alleviated me from the mortgage. MashaAllah. It has no weight, because if later on she says, actually, I want you to pay the bills, well, you have to. So that's an example. Those are two examples I usually hear about.
Okay, thank you.
And again, this is the Shafi'iyy school. I encourage you all to learn the school in which you want to live your life by. A lot of people go throughout life saying, I'm just Muslim. And as a result, they're confused because they're going through the Quran and Sunnah, whatever that means, as if they're qualified to interpret and break down and codify the Quran and Sunnah. And they're trying to find judgments that they are not going to find. The madahib are codified and their basis is the Quran and Sunnah. MashaAllah. So again, this is per the Shafi'iyy school, and I'm not familiar with the schools that everyone here follows. So please be patient with me. What about the stipulation the man must take the trash out? Well, that is his obligation according to the Shafi'iyy school. That is his obligation. And I think I had a slip of the tongue. I corrected it in the description last week in the video. In the Maliki school and the Hanafi school, cooking, cleaning is the wife's obligations. So for those of you guys who say, oh, I'm going for that contract. Well, again, I can't say the rest of the rights of the spouses may be to your liking. So don't be quick to trade in, hang up the towels and the mops for something that you may not be accustomed to. For example, in the Maliki school, what is the definition of a adil Muslim? Let me put it this way. If he doesn't do his rawatib prayers, his sunnah prayers after the obligatory prayers, he's not considered upright. So, you played yourself if you madhab hop or pick and choose, cherry pick masail. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, in the Shafi'iyy school, actually, thank you for reminding me to take the trash out. SubhanAllah. When this is over, let me write it down. But I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? Isra, is that the same hand? Please forgive me, I'm still learning how to use Teams.
Yeah, no worries. No, I had a second question, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, so my other question was, with the contract that you do, that you initiate, it has to be based on the school that you regularly follow. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. So if you're Maliki, but you want to do your marriage contract according to the Shafi'iyy school, technically, can you do that? Yes. This is known as talfiq or mixing of madahib. The only problem is if your partner, like you, let's say you're a Maliki and your partner is a Hanafi, and you do a contract according to the Shafi'iyy school because you picked your imam just based on convenience or he's a funny speech teller, what have you. The danger here, when I say danger, I mean as far as committing sins, is neither of you guys are versed in the Shafi'iyy school. So you might know how to do nikah and those rights in the Maliki school, and he might know the Hanafi school, but your marriage contract is conducted with a school of thought that neither of you guys know about. So it is recommended that at least one of them are knowledgeable, in regards, as far as they're not sinful in the school they do their nikah contract, and the other one is willing to learn from them. Don't say my husband is knowledgeable and I'll ask him if I have a question, because applying is a regular basis. It's a daily thing. It's not a one and done thing. So it's best again to find someone who adheres to the school that you follow. It's not haram if you do otherwise, but I would not see the wisdom in that. If someone has a counter argument, I'd like to hear it, but I wouldn't see the benefit in doing it in a school that you're not accustomed to or you don't know the judgments of.
Okay, Jazakallah.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Sabat. How should we know what a reasonable mahr is when asking for it? So we haven't gotten to the chapter of the mahr yet, but you guys are not holding me, so it's not a problem. The reasonable mahr, remember a mahr, and one may not like me saying this, but again, I don't have a slave contract with any masajid or institution, so I'm not going to cover the truth. I'm not going to lose followers or anything like that. The mahr is a gift. It's not an insurance policy. So when you guys are asking for $200,000 mahars in case he leads me, $200,000 will make me comfortable. That's how people think. You could ask that, but that is not, that is not what is recommended. That's not what's honorable. So remember, it's a gift. Ask your fiance what he can afford. If he is a school teacher and you're asking 25,000, yani 3/4 of his salary, you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. So you guys can have a discussion. Remember, it is a gift, not an insurance policy. If you want Hajj, cool. You want a Quran, cool. You want $5,000, $1,000 a year, $1,000 a month, or $5,000 up front, cool. But when you start going to these large numbers that you know he doesn't have, and he's excessive, then this leads to a lot of corruption in the community. I'm not talking about the ummah, we're talking about in the community. Because the man is no longer focused on the marriage. He's focused on this debt that is hanging over him. You're fighting him for this debt. You mention it when you guys are fighting and the D word comes up. We don't like the D word, divorce. He might commit haram, or he might start picking and choosing. All right, well, I owe you 20,000, so you have to pay your own health insurance. I owe you 20,000, so when we go out to dinner, you pay Venmo me because I'm not obligated to do dinner for you. And then you guys start nitpicking. So I say all this to say, and we'll talk about it later, is do what's easy. And even for those of you who ask for 50,000, I don't know what world you guys live in. 50,000 is not going to last you very long. It's not going to last you very long. And if you guys have children, if he's a good man of good repute, he's not going to, for example, divorce you. Let's say it's a mu'akhir, and then just watch you and your children struggle. He will pay that rent, or he'll pay that mortgage, or whatever it may be, and take care of your kids as a real man should. MashaAllah. So don't burden the man. It's a gift. So if there's one quote you can take today, the mahar is a gift. It is not an insurance policy. Allahi barak feek. Does somebody unmute? Is there any other questions or commentary?
I did unmute myself. I did have a question.
Okay, sure.
In regards to what you were saying on a woman's clothing, could you read the judgment again? I just never heard it like that in regards to the tight clothing. So, what is the example that the scholars use when they were referring to tight clothing? Because I know during the scholars' time, and in general, even if we're looking at like Christians or Jewish people, it's not really common that they dressed in tight clothing. So what was their example of tight clothing compared to our example today of tight clothing? And could you explain again why it's haram compared to like back in the day, what would be considered tight clothing? Hopefully that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And if my answer is not clear, I'll clarify the best of my ability and try to get you a reference, inshallah. In the medium to larger Shafi books, they talk about tight clothing as the clothing that accentuates the figure. So for example, you have a black abaya, right? You can't tell the woman's shape, generally speaking, when she wears it. Or likewise, a man's thobe, you can't tell how his shape is. But sometimes they describe the woman wearing a belt, and so when she wears a belt, it accentuates the shape of her hips, or it makes the breast protrude a little bit more, and so they refer to this as tight clothing. As for like wearing like those Lululemon leggings, right, or those Nike leggings, what I learned, and Sheikh Yahya al-Baltimore can explain this more, and I'll get you the reference as well. And I heard from other sheikhs as well, these like Lululemon type of pants, this is considered imitating the kuffar. So this is not just for the tightness per se. This is because the habit of wearing like these spandex-like clothing, like the pants, is a habit of the kuffar. And even from what I recall in the 90s, when you see those like 90s workout tapes, you would see those women wearing those pants like only when they're working out, but like walking out on the street with it, this is a custom that the kuffar developed. So what I learned is that it is haram to wear that because it's an imitation of the kuffar.
When you say like haram to wear it, for example,
could you repeat that, please?
Oh, sorry. When you say haram to wear it, for example, that would make sense outside of the house, but inside of the house?
No, not inside of the house. No, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
I thought I mentioned that. Please forgive me if I didn't mention that detail. Inside of the house, not only is it haram, if it makes your husband happy, you get reward for that kind of stuff. And like one of the sheikhs and sheikhas once told us, is what is rewardable to wear in the house for the husband, the women wear it outside. And they don't wear it in the house. In fact, they tell the husband, why do you always want me to dress up for you? Is all you think about sex? Very condescending, I would even say more so naive comments, because when we get married, we have to remember, like me, when I got married, I married a woman. My experience in life is with men. Likewise, most modest women, their experience, although they may have male friends, most of their interactions are with women. We're marrying someone of the opposite gender, and so it is in our best interest to know how their brain chemistry is, how Allah created them. And so there's reward in getting dolled up for the husband at home, and to keep up your appearance at home. And it hurts the heart of the man where he never sees his wife dressed nice unless they're going out to a wedding, for example. He's excited when they get invited somewhere because he finally gets to see his wife wear makeup, for example, or wear that perfume he likes. So I say that to say, wearing these tight clothings is not prohibited. In fact, you can get reward with the right intention, wearing it in the house for your husband.
Okay. Barakallahu feek. That was my question.
Ameen wa feekum. And I'm going to try to get the reference, inshallah ta'ala, for the tights. Because a lot of women are not familiar with that. They go out with tight tights in public. MashaAllah.
My question was, you know how you kept mentioning like the qualified groom? Forgive me if I'm not seeing it in the PDF, but are there like conditions or like details as to what actually qualifies somebody?
Yes, we haven't got to it yet, so we're building up to it. I thought we'd get to it today, but we're going to talk about the qualified groom. There's 5 conditions or criteria. If it's in the groom, yani inherently it's in the groom, then he would be considered a qualified groom. So we'll get to it in the next class, inshallah.